I'm Bob Sennett. I am a colon rectal surgeon. I was diagnosed officially in January of 18, and I realized then that neurology, their most important role is to make the diagnosis. And then you're offered the opportunity for a clinical trial. And as has been stated, there are so many exclusion criteria that many people can't participate for many reasons. But I couldn't reconcile to myself or my family the 50% chance of placebo. Therefore, I traveled to Seoul, South Korea for a stem cell treatment with neuroprotective agents. Imagine that. I'm a doctor in this great country, and I had to travel to South Korea. I was fortunate because I had the means, but most people can't. It's expensive and it's a 14-hour plane trip. So, excuse me. So I urge everyone to support these bills to allow people to have at least a chance in the fight. Because right now we have it's not a fair fight. There's nothing available outside of a trial to give us a chance in this fight. That's why I went to Seoul. I think the expanded access makes sense. I think what we're asking in these bills makes total sense. I can't imagine why any politician would not support it. This is not a partisan issue, and I urge everyone to please support this legislation.
I went on to train in anesthesiology at Johns Hopkins and subspecialized in pain management at UC San Diego. I felt on top of the world and was in the prime of my life, having just met my future wife when I received the devastating diagnosis of ALS at 35 years old. This was a complete shock as I was otherwise healthy and had no family history of ALS. I was fortunate to find a small clinical trial and enrolled despite an inhumane protocol that would leave 1/3 of the patients without actual treatment during or after the trial. As a physician, it was unimaginable that this had been allowed in 100% rapidly fatal disease. But let's fast forward to today. I've been locked out of any clinical trials or access to investigational treatments since 2013 because of trial restrictions. My family, friends, and I have corresponded with the FDA, pharmaceutical companies, and neurologists countless times. Despite my own medical background, knowledge, and connections in medicine, I've not been able to access a single investigational therapy for 7 years. The existing pathways of right to try, compassionate use, or expanded access to this day have only been empty words used to tell the hopeless and dying that something has already been done for them. I and many other ALS patients heard these words repeatedly, and unfortunately, most died while they fought and realized that these pathways provide no access for ALS patients.
This is the current horrific reality for everyone affected by ALS. This is why passing the Act for ALS bill in this Congress is so crucial. Delaying the passage of House Bill H.R. 8662 and its Senate companion bill S. 4867 will result in tremendous suffering and death by withholding access to treatments for terminal patients. Patients like myself can benefit from promising experimental therapies and benefit from the funding of expanded access programs and open label extensions. It is quite literally a bill of life or death. Act for ALS speeds up development of potential life-saving treatments by creating a grants program that invests in promising neurodegenerative disease research. I urge you to join our colleagues on both sides of the aisle and co-sponsor Act for ALS today. Thank you for your time. Sherry Minukadeh, 44-year-old physician dying of ALS.
My name is Suchit Patel. I am an MD PhD. I have a PhD in neuroscience. I am a practicing radiation oncologist. As a physician, And also as somebody who's been directly impacted with one of my close friends having been diagnosed with ALS, why the bill makes sense to me. It allows for expanded access to drugs that are promising under the umbrella of an existing FDA oversight infrastructure in a safe way where those drugs would be where those drugs would have greater access to patients at phase 3 clinical sites only. I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer about trying to get a drug in the hands of patients that need it most, that could have potentially life-altering impact in a way that's safe and administered by experts that are already doing that in a phase 3 clinical trial site. Part of the challenge that why this has been so difficult in ALS is because of the rarity of the disease and how trials have to be structured for a disease that is universally fatal and rapidly progressing. You know, there was a recent trial that Michelle mentioned at the beginning of this that failed to meet its endpoint and was declared a failed trial, and yet had 35% of patients that had an objective response. As a practicing oncologist, if there was an oncology trial that had a 35% objective response rate, we would be rejoicing for a rare oncologic condition. That would be an amazing trial. And yet for ALS, we declare that as a failed trial. And that's only because of the structural limitations of a clinical trial in a rare neurodegenerative disease, again, that's universally fatal. So to allow expanded access would broaden the denominator of those patients and therefore allow us to find a signal for a trial for a promising drug that's just harder to find, that we can't do because our trials are so small in ALS. Scientific progress in one area of medicine has tremendous halo effects in other areas of medicine. So by increasing funding for rare neurodegenerative diseases, you know, it's not like saying we're devoting $100 million only to ALS. It includes Parkinson's, it includes Alzheimer's, that includes Huntington's. You know, when you start thinking of neurodegenerative disease and things that can change symptomology or change progress in one of those areas, that's a whole range of diseases that comes out of that have impacts well beyond ALS. This is clearly not a partisan issue. This is a humanitarian issue, and it moves the needle on both humanitarian access and scientific progress. The bill in the House clearly has broad bipartisan support, and I hope that we can see this move forward.